Right, guys, we're here, Scapegoat, with the legendary Dan Higgs. Thank you very much for your time. So we're going to start, like all good stories do, at the beginning. So can we talk a little about, like right at the very beginning, like your kind of family life? Was it kind of artistic? Did you kind of like grow into an artistic family, things like that?
I did not grow up in an artist family.
No?
No, my mother read a lot of poetry, and she introduced me to classical mythology and poetry. So she wasn't really a poet herself. I think she dabbled in it.
Okay.
And I started drawing as a toddler, 2-3 years old, like most kids.
Yeah.
And then I kept doing that, but I started writing when I was probably about 10 or 11 years old.
Okay.
And and then I started playing music when I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
Started as a singer. And I was invited to join a friend's band because I wrote poems.
Yeah.
I had no musical experience, and I had no prior desire or fantasy to be in a band.
Yeah.
It's not something I ever imagined myself doing. I love music, but I thought that music was made by musicians, and I didn't consider myself a musician. And then for a long time, being in a band, I still didn't consider myself a musician. Now I almost dare to consider myself a musician.
Finally gay.
Yeah. But music is one of the great loves of my life, and I'm very fortunate to have had a life in music.
So you're like raised up in Baltimore?
I was raised all over the United States. I was born in Baltimore.
Yeah.
I can tell you real quick. I lived in Baltimore. Then I lived in a small utopian experimental suburb called Columbia. It was designed as a futuristic city, and it was racially integrated, and so-called same-sex couples were allowed to live there, which in the 60s was radical.
Yeah.
I mean, that was stated in the creed of the place. Like, everybody's welcome, who may not be welcome in the next town over.
Yeah.
And I lived there then. Then we moved. Then I moved to Omaha, Nebraska. Then from Omaha, Nebraska, I moved to Dallas, Texas. From Dallas, Texas, moved back to Baltimore. From Baltimore, moved to Detroit, Michigan. From Detroit, Michigan, moved to a suburb of Washington, D.C. in Virginia.
So how far?
From Virginia back to Baltimore. This is all before I was 13 years old.
Jesus, okay.
Then from 14 years old until I suppose around 23 years old, I lived in Baltimore. Then I moved to San Francisco. I was there 7 or 8 years. Then back to Baltimore for another 15 years. And then some years I left Baltimore 7 or 8 years ago and just traveled for a few years. Then lived in upstate New York. Then lived in Northern California, out in the mountains. And for 2 years now I've been living in Olympia, Washington, which is in the Pacific Northwest.
So you've definitely got this like Rolling Stones sort of past, like gathers no moss as you keep going on.
I've lived in many interior environments, many different apartments and houses. So I have some friends who grew up in one house, and that's always interesting to me, because I have no idea what that's like to have one space that's so familiar and so charged. So for me, the space, the location of my dwelling, is not really that important.
Yeah, it doesn't quite matter as much as other people.
I've had apartments that I loved and where I was fruitful in, and I've had others where I had difficult times in. But I'm not a location-based person.
So since that early stage of your life was so frantic and moving about, do you think that that's kind of built on what's made you who you are now?
Absolutely.
That sporadic nature through your artwork and the way how it kind of looks, and the way how you like images to go together, including your music as well.
Yeah,
it's not run of the mill.
I can only assume that it has a big influence on that. Yeah. But more directly, I just keep moving. I stay on the move. And as the son and grandson of immigrants, they were on the move too. That I come from people who pick up and leave, and then I've done it my whole life.
Yeah, so that's
and hopefully I don't feel like moving too much more. But for me, it's normal to be somewhere else all the time.
Yeah.
And my brother said to me once, he said, you live in continuous transition. And I think he's right. Of course, I think everybody does. But for me, the transitions are more radical, maybe. And I never arrive, and I'm just always in between. Except for lately. I'm feeling pretty settled lately, which is I'm enjoying.
So, as you were saying, you kind of picked up the pencil and you kind of got into that, and as you're saying, it was about 17 years old, you kind of got into music and things like that. So, on both sides of that coin, who was like influential to you? Who's the people that made you go, oh, that's cool, I'll either mimic that or try and do something stylistically like this?
Well, when I was really young, my main literary influences were music lyrics and comic books, and then I got really into science fiction and fantasy books because I also drew. I emulated some comics and made some some childish comics, and then I started reading the poems my mom had around. I can't really cite anybody in particular right at the moment. But there's so many,
Yeah, it was just this big mush.
I remember the Beatles, of course. Many people love the Beatles, but the thing that attracted me to the Beatles, I got into them after they'd probably broken up 3 years prior. But they were still in the air, and I just was astounded by the lyrics. This is when I was like 12, and my mother and I had many discussions about the lyrics, and she introduced me to the notion, that there's the obvious superficial meaning, and then there's other meanings, and some of those meanings are deliberately put there by the author, and some are not. And some are not there until you, the hearer, find them. They're just there for you. Or it just hits you in such a way. And then I was also really into the early Jethro Tull records up until Aqualung, also because of the lyrics. I don't know what I would think about them today. I'd have to review them, but as a boy, I just thought they were just so clever and so right on, And
me and my good lady went and saw them on their 50-year anniversary. Rather good, actually.
The Witch's Promise. Then when he started making I don't like it doesn't matter. But for a time, I was really into Jethro Tull, and then there's also another band I was really into at 11 or 12 was the Alice Cooper band. I don't know why. I still think he's a great rock and roll singer.
Brilliant performer.
A brilliant performer, and all the theater. I never saw him in concert. I never went to a big concert in my life.
Really? Okay.
I went to one. My brother and I went with my mother to hear Willie Nelson on the Red-Headed Stranger tour. That's the only massive concert I've ever been to.
For a big concert, that's a pretty good one. Wait for something horrible, but you managed to.
And we were kids. All the cowboys at the concert were smoking joints, which for us was we thought only hippies smoked joints. But we didn't know that these cowboys are actually hippie cowboys.
So you grew 10 years in 1 hour. So, coming on a little bit now then, so like you were talking about 17, you were kind of getting into a band, and like, what was that, like Reptile House?
No, that band was called the Goon Girls.
Goon Girls.
I think we did one show at a party, like a teenage party. But that would have been my first live performance. I was in a school play once, years before, in a non-speaking role, and even younger. I guess my first time on stage was probably in the first or second grade. I was 6 or 7 years old, and around Christmas time, some of the schools would do these live nativity scenes. And I was one of the shepherds. So I just stood still with a towel on my head and like a cane, like a stick. So that was my first performance. I portrayed one of the shepherds. 17 I started performing, and took to it pretty quick. I'm still learning about it now. I haven't mastered the art, but there's a lot to learn about how to do it, especially if you don't have a canned routine that you do every night.
Well, and also you're thinking you're a bit more of an imposter. You don't know what you're doing is right or wrong. So can we go through these bands that you've been in, as we were saying, like Reptile House and
I was in the Goon Girls. And that was my first taste of collaborating with others and making songs and putting lyrics to music. Then some of those people, and not others, we went on to form a band called Shrub, which I have not heard since we played, but I'm pretty sure it was a great band. Recently a cassette has surfaced, which I haven't heard yet, but I intend to try to get a copy when I get home. And I still remember the lyrics, and I remember the songs, And I think we were maybe accidentally a little bit ahead by accident.
Okay.
And we did maybe 4 concerts. And then there was Reptile House, which I was in for 4 years, which at the time seemed like an eternity. And then that band was a great adventure because all of us took our first cross-country drive from coast to coast and back. We were all teenagers in the van, and unsupervised, a lot of mayhem, and a lot of not eating for days and stuff like that. So characters, having a beer for your only meal of the day, and it builds character and strengthens some friendships and destroys others. And then Lungfish after that, and then we did that for roughly 20 years. Not quite 20 years, but almost. And then ever since then, I've been on my own, and until now I have a duo with my wife, which I encourage anyone who's ever had any interest in what I'm doing to check it out. It's called Fountain Sun, and I'm really into this project, and we have 2 albums out. And it's not widely known.
But this whole arc that you've been on is insane. Your work ethic as well. There's so many different titles that you put out, and it's not just music, it's poetry and books and tarot. It's just where do you find the time? Where did you get that work ethic instilled into you?
I consider myself, and I don't mean to be cute, I consider myself to be a lazy person.
Well, if you're lazy, God knows what the rest of
I think I should be doing more. I have too much idle time. Of course, you need some idle time to let the stuff percolate, and so I try to remind. I joke. I say I'm lazy, but I always say I always work in 24 hours a day, even when I'm asleep.
There's something taking over.
No vacation. So then the trick is to find time to relax and rejuvenate. But it doesn't seem. I know what you mean. I'm always working on something. Sometimes stuff comes out rapidly. Sometimes there's years I don't actually release anything in public. But it all starting to stack up now.
But I see that you started off kind of like individually, like the kind of Cone of Light and things like that. And even what was it like 2014, 15 time? What was it like the Sculpey Fest as well?
I did that.
Things like that. You're not worried or scared. You like to work with people that
give it a try.
Inspire you as well.
I love that band. That's why I did the work with them. I saw them in concert first, but I liked them as people also, and I had a good experience with them. I think they're a great modern rock and roll band. They're not for everybody, but I think have you heard them? I think they're great. They're done now.
Through you, that's how I heard.
They're done now, I think.
Oh well, that's that out the window. Never going to see that.
I'm done with them for years, but I think they're actually done now.
Well, looking at it from as we were saying, through your ethos and things like that, how do you think you have evolved from back in them days and you being like a bright-eyed kid all the way through to now doing like solo works and working with your wife and things like that? How have things changed on that process for you?
Well, let me think about that for a second. I don't really think much has changed. I work every day, and because I work every day, like everything else in this dimension, the work changes and grows. Sometimes in the direction I want it to, sort of. Other times it goes in a different direction, and you just got to follow along.
You still learn something.
One thing I would say that's been, I think I recognize as a characteristic of my work is for better or worse, and for reasons unknown to me, I can only do exactly what I'm doing. I can't, if I were to wish it to sound like something else, or look like something else, or feel like something else, I can't seem to make that happen. I think the work that I'm doing is always exactly as it is each day. And then there's slow changes over time. And we're all growing and changing as individuals, as human beings.
Yeah.
So my idea of what I think I am making is changing, and I think now I don't really know how to answer the question. Yeah.
It's up to us to decide that.
Yeah, I don't really know how to, and I don't know what other people are hearing. When they hear what I've done, or seen what I've done. But
so okay then, since you can see how your music evolves or articulates it, how do you think then the scenes have evolved from the Baltimore days to you touring now and seeing things like that? How's the music been received? And how
my music? I've been also fortunate in that I've seemed to, at all stages, even from early on, to have always found my audience or our audience. I've always had people listening. Sometimes people are listening and they reject it. And back then you get a lot more immediate criticism from audiences. There's a thing called heckling, which is doesn't happen so much anymore. Which is
in the UK, my friend, all the time.
I get heckled now and then, but it happens so infrequently. When it does happen, it's startling. When you used to expect it, and be ready for it.
Part and parcel of the experience.
Yeah, and but I also have never had unrealistic expectations about how many people I ought to be playing. I've never performed in front of a room of 20 people and I was thinking there should be 200 people here, or I want to play for 2,000 or 10,000, and I know this drives some people. That one of their chief concerns is always expanding the numbers of their audience. This has never been a concern for me, never. I mean, sometimes there's the economic concern if you're traveling in a band and you need the bread to keep. It's a big undertaking. So then it's, but I'm not talking about that. So that's changed, and I think a big change that everybody may have noticed, which is a positive one and seems to be sticking. Is when I first started, a lot of gigs and concerts were restricted genre-wise, and then Baltimore mixed programming started happening pretty early, and Lungfish was we were really concerned with that, and we played with all kinds of other music and really working to dissolve the distinctions, and when we first started inviting musicians from other circles and other so-called styles of music, often the audience would be disturbed because they're so used to hearing a 3-band, back then even a 5-band bill, of 5 bands that all sound pretty much the same.
It was quite exclusionary. This is our little club. Go away.
And the Baltimore, those barriers fell pretty quick, and now it's just normal to go to a concert and you don't know what you're going to hear. And then that's extended even into larger cities where you have a greater variety of musicians available. There was a place called Zebulon in Brooklyn that's no longer there, and I used to go there not even knowing who was going to play, because it didn't matter.
You're going to find something.
And there'd be music, they'd have musicians from Morocco, and then a noise act, and then a jazz trio, and then a singer-songwriter, anything. And then they'd show a film.
Nice. Like a matinee.
And I think everyone would agree that's positive. The next step is to take it all the way, and you have full days programming where you get Beethoven's Fifth, then you have some hip hop, then you have Neurosis, and then you have bagpipes. I mean, you have everything, like a music temple. And the music temple, to be a true music temple, no musical expression could be, excluded. Even I would think when we get our true music temple up and going, we'd even have to include corporate music, which is diabolical, but it's still music. Commercial jingles.
Plus, if all are welcome, you've got to let it be all.
it's all or nothing, man. All are welcome. Yeah.
So, I would like you now to try and explain to me, like, what is the impetus to keep doing this? Like, you're quite a worldly man. As I say, you've been a tattoo artist, you've done multiple other jobs, you've been quite high in some fields and low in others, and somewhere in the middle with other ones. So what is the impetus to pack the van, jump in it, like, and travel to what? Like,
I think at this point in my life, I've only come to think this recently, and not to sound too uppity or anything, but I think it's my duty.
Yeah.
That's what I think, and of course I enjoy it, so it's an easy duty to fulfill. But what I try to make happen with the music, especially in concert, is I try to, my responsibility in that role is to try to encourage greater communication amongst the group that's gathered together for that purpose. People might think they're there to expose themselves to some aesthetic pleasure or to make the scene, but when the concert is a good one, at any kind of concert, I mean, even the word concert, etymologically, I think that you could interpret it to mean con always means with. Cert must have something to do with certainty. So to be certain together, and not certain about anything other than the togetherness itself.
Being a part of that.
We are certainly together in this event, and it's unquestionably positive. You know, it's the musical harmony becomes human heart peace harmony. You know, and that's what it's all about. And in my own small way, I try to participate in the larger universal concert. That's why I still do it, and also I enjoy it. I like the traveling. I love to play. I play alone every day. I play with my wife every day. If the weather's nice, I try to play outside every day.
Constant refinement.
Yeah, and then to take it and play in front of strangers is a whole other set of challenges that it improves the music. If my music improves, my music can only improve if I improve as a human being. That's what the music's for. You can't lie to yourself with your music. You maybe can deceive yourself, but you can't tell a bald-faced lie.
Exactly. Well, you can also tell if there's passion involved in the thing that somebody's doing. If they don't give a shit, it falls flat.
Even if they're excellently executing.
Exactly. Passion over talent every time, in my opinion. So, to go alongside that, is there any true antics throughout the years that you've done that you'll divulge for us? Any funny stories?
Well, the thing about the stories is I have many stories, but I can't tell them unless if they come up in context. There's an association, and I think of it. I have some of my greatest hits of my stories. People, when there's someone new or a small gathering, someone will say, "Tell that one about the such and such," and I really can't do it.
You're struggling for it.
I don't know. I can't get it. I can't do the thing. It has to. But I hope. Lately in the concerts, I've been telling more stories if they come up. So maybe I'll tell some later. But antics, I can't think of anyone in particular that I can't think of one right now.
That's all good. So, just to wrap this up then, in the last couple of nice easy ones, what is the future for Dan Higgs then?
Well, a new Fountain Sun album, I hope, when I get home. That'll be our third album. I got my eye on a new instrument. Maybe that will be in my future when I get home. I'll go check it out.
Nice. So just same as always. Write, record, print, repeat.
I'm doing the same things I've been doing since I was just out of diapers. That's the thing. That's the weirdest thing of all. I never made any big changes. I'm doing the greatest change perhaps is somehow I've been blessed to find a way to make sure there's enough time to do it in earnest. Whereas when I was younger, I had to have jobs, sometimes 2 jobs, etc. And still was doing it, but with less energy. More energy was going to this other stuff. So I'm not nothing, drawing, then writing, then music, then the rest of my life. So I hope to do my work until my last day on Earth, if I'm so blessed.
Well, if you're still cracking that painting, so maybe take one off of you at some point.
I'm still making them. I'll give you my email.
Definitely will do.
All right.
So, last but not least, the whole point of this channel is for me to shine the light on musicians and bands and things that don't normally get the spotlight. So, is there any bands or musicians that you personally think deserve the spotlight that don't quite do it?
Oh, I'm sure there are. And again, on the spot, always my mind goes blank. But let me think about it for a second. If I think too long, you can edit it.
Yeah, you're coming straight down.
Let me think about it for a second, because there certainly is. Well, there's a guy I love in New York who was a phenomenal guitar player and singer and lyricist, and you never hear about him. His name is Doug Shaw, or Sleepy Doug Shaw. You ever heard of him? For a little, I think he's from England, but he lives in the U.S. and for a while, maybe he doesn't want anybody to know. Yeah. I hope I'm not blowing his cover. But he was in White Magic for a little while.
Okay.
I haven't heard him play in a few years, but when we were on the East Coast, I heard him all the time. Yeah. He's just a great pleasure to listen to. I've never heard his recordings much, but I've seen him live a bunch.
Yeah.
I'm sure I can think of somebody else. Oh, one of my greatest, you asked about influences earlier, one of the greatest influences in my life from maybe the time I was in my early 20s, not so much materially or mechanically, but a spiritual influence is a man named Dick Turner, who's also a fellow Baltimorean.
Okay.
He's completely unknown.
Yeah.
And he lives in Paris now. He's been there for over 20 years. He works in all media. He's done. He's written plays, essays, poetry, written and produced films, acted in films, scored films. He's a composer. He composes for large ensembles, small ensembles. Then in last decade, he got into the pop form. His version of that.
He sounds very Zappa-esque.
He does everything, and with total commitment, and without a lot of outside encouragement. And he just keeps at it, and he's always been, to me, the model of what I consider the ideal artist.
Yeah.
And he does concerts every now and then, mostly in Paris. He's got a great film he made, a deep scatological exploratory film called La Grosse Commission, which I read the play. He wrote the play in English. Yeah. When I read the play, I laughed so hard I cried. I mean, I was truly weeping.
Nice.
There's so many puns. I mean, when you start getting into shit puns, you can
dad joke on dad joke.
Yeah. And then it gets, it's inevitably going to get a little Freudian.
Yeah.
And then he produced the play in English in Paris. Of course, it didn't go over.
Yeah.
Because English plays aren't working in Paris so well. So then he rewrote it to make a film, and he made a French film. And La Grosse Commission, pardon my pronunciation, but that means the big job. Yeah. Which sounds like a heist film, sort of, right?
Yeah.
But in France, when a child has to urinate, the child, tugs the mother's sleeve and says, "Mama, la petite commission," the small job. It means have to urinate. And when the child has to move their bowels, they say, "Mama, la grosse commission," the big job.
Well, that's definitely going in there forever now.
Yeah. And he's made other films, and he's made some I haven't seen yet. And I was fortunate enough to get to spend a little time with him on his tours. I haven't seen him in a few years. Let me think of a third person real quick. Person was a person I haven't heard her music in a while. She's a gifted musician. She does all kinds of stuff as well in music and performance. I performed with her in Glasgow 7 or 8 years ago. Her name is Maya Donetz. And I don't think she has a lot of records out, but she gives concerts, and of course there's videos on the YouTube. And if I sat here and thought about it, I could think of a lot more people, but we'll leave it at that for now. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for some of your time. It was
thank you.
Pleasure.
I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go see you very shortly, and I cannot wait.
Me too. See you down there.
Cheers.